Hi guys, this story that we're going to talk about today is heartbreaking. It involves the death of little 5-year-old Jordan Rodriguez. In 2017, the Cleveland police got a call from Pakistan. The caller identified himself as the brother of Chris Rodriguez, who was at the time serving time in jail for unpaid child support. He said that his brother tearfully told him that he had helped hide the deceased body of little Jordan in the home he shared with his girlfriend, Larissa Rodriguez. Now, interestingly, they were not married. They both just happened to have the same last name. But he stated that they buried Jordan in the backyard. He stated that Jordan had died in September. The phone call, took place mid-December. So the police get this phone call and they send the officers out to the home, and now it's just mom at home. So this is 34-year-old Larissa Rodriguez, who is the mom of 9 children and pregnant at the time. The officers don't divulge to her anything about the phone call. They just say they're there for a well check and that they would like to see the children. She explains to them that only 5 of her children live with her because the other ones had previously been taken away by social services and placed in other homes, be it extended family members and foster homes. So that leaves 5, the youngest 5, living in the home. And when they ask to see the children, she takes them upstairs where, 4 little children are watching television. And when they inquire about the 5th child, she goes on this long story about how Jordan is the 5th child, but he is in Texas visiting his father, his biological father's family, for the Christmas holiday. This was December 19th. So the police say, okay, that's fine, but we're going to need some contact information, phone numbers, addresses, anything that you have for the family members. And then she tells them that she doesn't have any information. And the officer even says to her, you sent a 5-year-old to another state and you don't even have a phone number for the people? And she goes on to say, all these crazy things. Well, this one just got a new phone, and that one just got their phone shut off, and that one just changed their number. I mean, it's like a song and a dance. And the police at this point are suspecting that she's lying. It should also be noted that the police stated that the home was actually in complete, just unsanitary conditions. There was rats, there was just roaches running everywhere, there was trash. They described it as horrific. So at this point, they start to really question her about where Jordan is, what really happened to Jordan. And as she continues to be later interviewed, actually interrogated, and she starts to crumble a little bit, some of the truth starts to come out. And it ends up leading to them finding the body of Jordan in the backyard. So both parents, I guess Chris wasn't really the parent, he was mom's boyfriend, but he was living in the home as the male figure. They never really tell them what actually happened to Jordan, and sadly to this day, authorities don't really know. But when the child was found buried in the backyard, it was clear that he had endured a long history of systematic abuse. There was just a lot of injuries to the child. And it was never really clear if he died from the lack of medical attention, from, this ongoing abuse and obviously very serious injuries towards the end, or if one final act had caused his death. So the parents were convicted. Larissa got 24 years and her boyfriend got 28 years. But there's so much more to this story, because prior to the truth coming out and this brother calling from Pakistan and alerting anybody, there apparently had been a long history of different treatment towards Jordan than the other children that Larissa had. And part of that may have been because he was autistic. And I guess his behavior had become increasingly difficult for Larissa to manage. And, that would kind of make sense because, clearly, she had way too many children. And I am a fan of big families. I'm not saying by any means that it's wrong that she had this many children. I'm saying that for her, she clearly should not have had this many children because, some of them ended up out and adopted, out of the home. And then we know what happened to poor Jordan. Clearly she was overwhelmed with the task of being a mother to so many children. And there were so many different fathers to these children that she obviously had a hard time keeping healthy relationships with men. And the men that were the fathers, many of them themselves were either uninvolved or had their own criminal backgrounds. So it was just all around a bad situation. And it looks like there was a lot of poverty in the situation as well. So family members did come out after and during interrogations, and they did say that they saw that Larissa treated Jordan very differently. Now, some said that was because of his developmental delays and that she struggled with that. But one of the fathers of one of the other children said that he believed it was because little Jordan was very light-skinned and that she really, she didn't care for that. She felt differently towards him because he looked more Caucasian than her other children, and that she really was kind of put off by that, and that was just his interpretation of the situation. So we don't know what really was going on or why she felt differently towards Jordan. She definitely struggled as a mom, and she definitely did not have a lot of patience with her children, and she seemed to lash out at them quite regularly. However, she did seem to show some level of love and nurturing to the children to the best that maybe she had the ability to do so. I just don't know that she was doing that with Jordan as much, if at all. Now, when her boyfriend was in jail, there was a lot of conversations between them over the telephone, and those phone calls are recorded from the Department of Corrections, and they were released. Don't judge me. I listened to 14 hours, not in one sitting, okay, of these phone calls. And once I edit this and put it up and whatever, I will try to link those in the description. You probably won't listen to 14 hours of them like I did, but I was very engrossed in this case, and my heart was really breaking for this little boy, and I really wanted to understand the family and the dynamics and really understand if Larissa was a victim herself or if she was just a horrible, evil person. So I really wanted to listen to these tapes. They were nauseating. Absolutely nauseating, because I and you, when you listen to them, will know at that point that little Jordan is already deceased. So when you're listening to them talking back and forth, it's sickening, because this whole time they're talking about nonsense and you're thinking, you two buried a 5-year-old like 3 months before, or less than that, because his body was found in December. So these phone calls were some point between, probably October and, or November, early December. And every phone call started off, I kid you not, every single phone call starts off with him saying, like, what was his little tagline? Hi, my sexy soulmate. And she's like, hi. And, they're so like grossly lovey-dovey. And, they have all the usual, I love you too, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to lose you. Are you ever going to let me go? Oh, no, I love you. And all of this. And then the typical like jail stuff where he basically harasses and banters her for canteen money in like every single phone call. And he's like bitching that, the pizza that he got was gross and he didn't like the hamburger. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? And then at one point they're talking, and this is like the only time that there's even a hint of them talking about Jordan. But it comes down to themselves. not the little boy. So she was apparently on Section 8, which is a government program where if somebody has financial difficulty, low income, they can apply for Section 8. It's very hard to get. Some states have waiting lists like 5 to 7 years, but Larissa had Section 8. And a lot of times if you're involved with Child Protective Services, they will actually boost you up on the list if you need housing. So she had Section 8, and what that means is that the government will pay the majority of your rent and you'll pay a tiny portion, whatever you can afford. And I mean, that can be as low as like $30 a month, you know, sometimes much more, but it can literally be like $30 a month and the government will pay the other, you know, 1,000 or more. So to be on Section 8, you have to have an inspection. And I'm assuming it's once a year. It could be more, but from my understanding, it was once a year that she was having this inspection. Well, she lived in kind of a rundown apartment. And so they had come for the inspection, and they're all worried about the inspection prior to it, you know, and he's making these references about how she has to pass the inspection because if you have to move, so like if you fail the inspection, they'll make you move to another house that's, you know, that passes their inspection. You know, they want it to be at least a safe environment and everything in working order because they're paying most of the rent. So they have the right to insist that where you live, you know, is deemed habitable. So he's freaking out on the phone because he's like, if you have to move, I'm going to go to jail for the rest of my life. Well, basically, we know at this time that Jordan is deceased and we know that he's in the backyard. So from this, we gather that he means if you have to move and new people move in and for whatever reason they excavate the backyard or anything should happen, they're going to find the child. And the whole time he's going on about how he's going to have to go to prison for the rest of his life. When then she starts to be like, well, yeah, no, me too. I'm gonna be talking to you from jail. And he's like, oh, no. You and the kids are gonna go on with your life. I'm gonna be the one taking the fall. They're like arguing basically about who's gonna take the fall and who's gonna go to jail over Jordan being discovered. Although they never actually say that. They just keep saying if you don't pass the inspection and you have to move. But, you know, we're able to deduct from this conversation what they're talking about. So she fails the inspection. Well, then there's one phone call where he's losing his shit. And she's saying all the things she's going to do. Because if you fail the inspection, the landlord is given a certain amount of time to fix those things. And then they come back and they re-inspect. And then if you still don't pass, I guess, like, that's it. So he knows that she's got one shot left. And he's, like, harassing her to get her older son, who I think at this point was maybe like 17 and did not live with them, named Angel, to come and fix all this stuff in the house. And he's telling her all these people that she can call and, you know, calling in favors for all these people that can come help her fix up the house and different things she can do to basically, you know, like, I can't think of the word, make it look presentable, you know, not necessarily fix it, but kind of make it pass. You know, paint this and, you know, board up that and do this and do that. And he's like giving her all these demands. And the whole time he is just freaking out. So I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, like, there's a 5-year-old child buried in your backyard. And the extent of you caring about that is how it's going to affect you. And how creepy that you've decided that you have to stay in this house just so that if you can never move, because he may be discovered. Now, when she's interrogated, she ends up saying the reason that he was buried in the backyard was because she wanted to keep him close to her. She didn't want him far away. Yeah, okay. I think that they just wanted control over the situation. If he was right there, they had more control to figure out, you know, if he was going to be seen, if anybody was on to them. Now, they had a long history with Child Protective Services. So you would ask, well, why, when there were social workers coming to the house and whatnot, and checking on them, did nobody ever notice that Jordan wasn't there? Are you ready for this? Because their social worker, Nancy Carabello, was buying food stamps from Larissa. So the only time she really showed up at the house was to give her money and to take the food stamp card. And I guess she was buying them like 50 cents on the dollar. And this went on for years. Well, after this whole case came out, and they looked into CPS, because why in the hell did nobody ever notice if you were going to the house and you were doing checks on the house and the kids, did nobody notice that the kid wasn't there? This is how the food stamp fraud came out, which she was convicted of, and I think she got like 3 years in jail or something. But so she was going there, and she was just basically most of the time just going to the door, getting her food stamp card, giving her the money, and leaving. And then she was, forging the paperwork and saying that she checked and everything was fine. It's almost like you can't even believe this actually happened, but it happened. And like I said, later family would describe that Jordan was regularly mistreated. They talk about him being in the corner. Remember, it was like at that point, just turned 5, so 4 and 5 years old. He was in the corner for, hours and hours and hours, that if he cried or screamed, they would put a sock in his mouth and just like all of this stuff. And I don't think they were much better to the other kids, but I guess Jordan definitely got it the worst. And matter of fact, on these jail calls, he's like really unbalanced, because 1 minute he's like, I really miss you and the kids. I just miss my family. Then the kids would be in the background, yelling and crying and playing. There's still 4 kids and they were very, very young. He would snap and he would just be like, tell them to shut the F up, and their crybaby effing mouth and da-da-da-da-da. You tell them when I get home, I'm going to whoop them. And then one of the little kids was not very old. I mean, she was like young elementary school age, and he would start yelling at Larissa to tell her, the little girl, to go whip the younger siblings and say it was from him and that the party was over when he gets home because he's not putting up with this. And Larissa, who tried to act in the interrogations like, he was the brutalizer and she was this, loving, coddling mom who often fought with him because she wanted to be sympathetic towards the children. And she wasn't much of a disciplinarian. She's on the phone like egging him on. I would have been like, excuse you, she's on the phone like egging him on. She's like, oh yeah, they're all going to get a whooping. I'm so tired of them, bunch of crybabies. I mean, it was, and then they'd go right back to talking like, my sweet lover, my sweet soul, sexy soulmate. Like, they were like up and down with their tempers towards the kids. And that's just little blurbs that we're hearing on these very short, jail calls are not very long because you're paying per minute. So I'm thinking, if they couldn't get to a phone call without freaking out, what were they like behind closed doors with all of these children? Now, Larissa was no stranger to violence. Her own adoptive mom was killed in the early 90s by her own boyfriend in a domestic violence situation. So it makes you think that what is horrifying to us on some level is probably kind of normal to Larissa. And, I've watched her interrogation at this point probably about 5 times, and I'm still very mixed on what I feel about her. I think that, she had a history of a dysfunction in her own childhood. I think that there was some SA in her childhood. She lost her mother to domestic violence. It seems like men to her was something that, she just, she expected dysfunction from, she expected violence from, and that she gravitated towards these kind of men. I think part of it was, like I said, just normal to her. Part of it was that she was way in over her head. She gave birth to her 10th child while she was in jail. And I don't know, and I'm not taking any responsibility off of her because she lied a lot in the interrogation. She definitely tried to make herself look completely victimized. If I had to put my money on it, I would say it is likely that Chris was the one that administered the fatal blows to Jordan. And she admits that she was very negligent in not getting him medical care. And once he was deceased, I think she was very afraid that she was going to lose all of her other children. But still, that's no excuse, Also, she said, this is wild, she said in the interrogation that She didn't think it was her fault. She didn't think it was Chris's fault. She actually thought it was demons in the house. She stated that the house that they moved into was a house where the father that previously lived there had killed his own son. Now, I've not been able to find any information on that, but she insisted that to be true. And she said that the house basically was haunted and had malevolent forces in it, and it took over Chris. Judging from Chris, the way he acted in jail, away from the malevolent forces, I don't think that he needed dark entities to help him along the way to a life of violence. I think that was just part of his life in general and part of who he was. So it's a very sad case. It's a very sad case. So all the other children have now been placed in foster care. I think one of them is now living with her father. And Larissa will be in jail for at least the next 24 years, and Chris will be in jail for the next 28 years. I believe they still communicate, even though I'm not sure that you're really supposed to do that in jail. But I did hear that they still communicate, and I guess they're still very much in love. And so that's that. That's the story of little Jordan. It is very sad. Tell me what you think. Tell me if you end up listening to the tapes. They're nauseating. They're really nauseating. They're nauseating anyway, but they're really nauseating when you understand that at the time of these phone calls, there's a child buried in the backyard. I mean, one of them had to be sometime in late October because she's talking about a Halloween event she's coming home from with the other children. And I'm thinking, how are you just out doing that? How are you out like trick-or-treating or whatever you're doing, knowing that your little 5-year-old is laying under the ground in your backyard? And then mixed in with all that, like I said, is the foolishness there. At one point, she doesn't talk to him. He has to keep calling her because she thinks he talked to another girl, because that should be a big concern at this point. And, you know, he's always yelling at her because she didn't answer the phone fast enough, or because she doesn't have the kids settled in time to talk to him, and they're being loud. And I mean, the nonsense that these two talk about or argue about when there is a deceased child as a result of them in her backyard. It is mind-boggling. So kudos to the brother who had the courage to make that call. And, you know, rest in peace, little Jordan. And I wish well for all of her other children. And I hope that their lives end up, you know, restored, and that they have some happiness in their life. So tell me what you think about the case, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.